Hi, good morning, everyone. So I'll make my talk quick because the next speaker, Matt, has so much knowledge to share, or he just doesn't stop talking. So I've been sandwiched by two guys. I was with them the other night, and my brother was saying we were in Big Bang Theory in your penny. So if you guys are familiar with that, so here we go. So it's great to see so many familiar faces. A lot of you guys we've shared sites with, from the early surveys that shaped these projects to the first LIDARs that we've measured the potential of those sites for. Most of what I'll share comes from those same experiences. So the ground reality that often decides whether a project moves smoothly or gets stuck along the way. Under the DOE's National Renewable Energy Program, the Philippines is targeting 35% renewable energy by 2030 and 50% by 2040. And we all recognize that wind will carry a significant part of that journey. As of April 2024, the DOE has awarded 92 offshore wind energy service contracts, representing about 65 gigawatts of potential capacity. By mid-2025, 87 active offshore contracts total roughly 68 gigawatts. Altogether, the country holds about 178 gigawatts of technical offshore potential. At the same time, onshore wind continues to grow, driven by a target of 5 gigawatts of installed capacity by 2030. Supported by initiatives like the Green Energy Auction Program and new service contracts with private developers. We've set these targets together, offshore, onshore, across the whole energy mix. But are we really moving fast enough and doing what it takes to build them right? Achieving those numbers takes more than ambition. It requires understanding the terrain, the land systems, the access, and the coordination that turn paper targets into working projects. After deploying dozens of LiDARs and MetMass nationwide, we've seen a pattern. Most setbacks don't start in construction. They start long before the first foundation is drawn. Today, I want to share some lessons from the ground, where global experience meets local reality, and how small details, if left unseen, quietly grow into multi-million peso delays. Every project moves through three phases. There's pre-development, construction, and then operations. So most of the developers will focus where the budgets are largest, which you all know is construction. And I totally understand why. We hold back in the early stage because the site still feels uncertain. But how often does that initial saving end up costing us much more just a few months later? From experience, the most expensive mistakes begin in the cheapest phase, which is pre-development. Choices made here, like site selection, access planning, boundary verification, decide everything that follows, like civil work costs, logistics, and long-term yield. Think of it as compounding interest, but in reverse. Every uncertainty in pre-development compounds into construction risk, and every construction risk compounds into operational loss. By the time it reaches the operation stage, that small uncertainty has multiplied tenfold. A weak foundation in this stage doesn't just delay a project, it multiplies its cost. And I think everyone here has seen that happen when one small oversight early on snowballs into months of redesign. That's why this phase, quiet, low budget, but decisive, is where success really starts. Our partners operate in advanced markets, the North Sea, Vietnam, and Taiwan. In those places, a single national permit can unlock hundreds of megawatts. But in the Philippines, it's a very, very different frontier. There's fragmented land ownership, barangay level authority, limited infrastructure, and terrain that changes every few kilometers. In the Philippines, one barangay signature can lock down a whole logistics chain. This isn't a disadvantage, it's a reality. And it challenges us. How do we align international standards with local conditions without losing either precision or practicality. Because that balance between global method and local reality decides whether our 178 gigawatt potential becomes real generation. We've seen project agreements were signed early and everything looked clear until surveyors arrived and found coordinates on steep slopes or overlapping titles. In Europe, cadastral data is digital and precise. Here, the gap between paper titles and ground truth can span meters, and those meters can cost us months. The best time to understand the property is before any contract is signed and not after. Please remember that because we've seen so many contracts signed without the developers understanding the actual property. Once the ink dries, every boundary correction becomes a negotiation. We've all been in that situation where technical work stops and the paperwork takes over. In practice, the projects that stay on schedule are the ones that start with a full boundary and topographic survey, covering the actual site and a bit beyond it. That extra coverage matters because turbine layouts often shift toward ridge edges or higher ground once designs are finalized. Having that data early prevents another round of surveys later. The parcel survey can follow once the final site is confirmed, but early boundary and topographic validation prevent costly redesigns and disputes. Our experience shows it's important to consult neighboring landowners early, even outside the main site, because local boundaries don't always match the paper maps. Many right-of-way issues start not inside the site, but next door. Michael Brower in Wind Resource Assessment wrote that a site is never defined by a single point, but by the area that represents the wind resource, the terrain, and its uncertainty. Every hour spent defining that area early buys weeks of certainty later. Access is one of those quiet risks that looks simple until it isn't. We've had routes that look fine on maps. They even passed their ocular inspections until mobilization day. Suddenly, a bridge disappears in the rainy season, or a barangay withdraws consent. In other regional markets, access planning happens alongside site mapping. In the Philippines, it's often finalized after site selection. And by then, every detour means more fuel, more time, and more negotiation. What looks like a short reroute on a map can be weeks of standby on site. And terrain doesn't just affect logistics, it affects the wind itself. Sites with steep gradients or broken access roads aren't just hard to reach. They change how the wind behaves. That variation, wind shear, and turbulence affects both measurement accuracy and foundation stress later on. That's why topographic and boundary surveys aren't only about getting there. They help make the wind and engineering models speak the same language. When those align early, we avoid logistical and technical rework later. If onshore access can delay mobilization, offshore adds a totally different layer. Consultants coming from mature markets often base their schedules on North Sea timelines, which is 4 to 6 weeks from planning to deployment. But here in the Philippines, because we have few vessels suited for floating LiDAR or met ocean buoy work, but also because permitting, vessel alignment, and other local logistics follow a different rhythm altogether. We still charter vessels from neighboring countries like Taiwan and Singapore that add several more weeks to lead time. That's another reason why early coordination becomes critical. But this isn't a failure. It's the operational truth of an emerging market. That's why early planning for FLS procurement and vessel scheduling is critical. Recognizing that difference early saves both time and credibility. It's not about being behind, it's about planning for the realities we have. By construction stage, the engineering is world class, but the ground, it's still Filipino. We've seen grading changes, tilt foundations, and coordinate mismatches between foreign design and local execution cause rework. These aren't errors in competence. They're gaps in feedback between field and design. The fix is one habit, continuous verification. Every drawing, every coordinate, every build must be checked, matched, and confirmed. When data flows both ways, from ground to design and back, everyone works from the same truth. Remember, precision isn't paperwork, it's financial protection. When turbines start spinning, performance matters. But what sustains investor confidence is data integrity. The SCADU system collects real-time turbine data, wind speed, output, downtime, and grid parameters. It's managed by the OEM, monitored by the developer, and reported to DOE and NGCP. When SCADU outputs, DOE reports, and as-built coordinates share one verified reference system, it builds trust and reduces friction. We don't lose time because of typhoons. We lose time because of assumptions, and that's something we can control. Precision in data is how we prove our 2030 and 2040 targets aren't aspirational, they're achievable. Across projects, the pattern repeats, not because teams lack skill, but because decisions outpace validation. The most expensive delays begin in the cheapest phase, which is pre-development, where a week of fieldwork can save months later. Every hour of verification buys weeks of certainty. That's the mindset shift we need. Validate first, contract second. The Philippines won't build wind farms exactly like Europe or Japan, and that's okay. Our geography is complex, our community is deeply involved, and our conditions are unpredictable. But our potential, as you all know, is extraordinary. I mean, I think I have 120 extraordinary people here that will make this happen for us. So I'm really confident that whether it's a met mass onshore or a floating LiDAR offshore, you guys will know that the principles are the same. See the ground before the numbers, validate early, build with precision, and deliver with trust. Because every megawatt starts not with technology, but with the terrain and how well we understand it. In a country with this much potential, precision is not just a technical goal, it's a shared responsibility. If we do that together, developers, consultants, and those of us who measure the ground, then the 178 gigawatts we talk about today won't stay as numbers on paper. They'll become towers, turbines, and energy. That power real progress, measured not just in megawatts, but in certainty. If we measure better, plan better, and build better, who says we can't lead Asia's next wind frontier? Thank you very much, and I give it to Matt now. If anybody has to use the restroom before he starts talking, please do so. Right? We have a 5-minute technical break.